Alright. Well, it's been a little while since I've done a little sit-down video at the desk like this, but might as well do one. So, here we go. What is going on, guys? Hope you guys are having a fantastic night tonight. Surgie, that's me, Surgie, back at it again with another video. And for this video, I wanted to do something a little bit of kind of like a story time video I wanted to give you. Today, I'm going to be giving you guys a little bit of backstory as well as some insight to where my Honda Civic came from. There's a lot of backstory that goes on to this car, and there's also a lot of different things that, like I said, I've done to this car. And there's also a lot of different points in time in my life that have happened, current events and stuff, that have allowed me to get that car and bring it to where it is today. So this car was originally my father's car. My dad actually bought this brand new in 2009. At the time before he bought this car, he was actually driving around a 1998 GMC Jimmy SLS. 4.3 liter V6, 4-speed auto, 4L60E, 4-wheel drive, the whole 9 yards. That thing eventually rotted out. At the time that he got that car, it was on its second engine. The 4.3 that he had in it, very, very high mileage. It was getting up there, and eventually it just crapped the bed. It blew a head gasket. There was oil that was flowing out of the dipstick tube, like something in the pickup got caught or something like that, or there was like a hole somewhere that wasn't supposed to be there, and it was basically overflowing the oil through places that it shouldn't have been. He eventually got that motor replaced, and he ended up getting another motor that was put in it, 60,000 miles on it. The motor that he put in it had 60k miles on it. Eventually that one started developing issues as well. So he actually ended up driving from a town that's about 30 minutes away from here, and what ended up happening was it threw a rod right through the side of the block. Oil and coolant was just leaking everywhere. Now, how my dad managed to blow up a 4.3 V6 with 60,000 miles on it, I really don't know how he did it, but my dad did it. He blew up that 4.3 liter. The sad part is it was just regular driving too. Like there wasn't even any like rough housing or flooring the gas pedal down to the floor. There was no high RPM. There was no low oil pressure. Nothing like that. It was just a regular daily driver that he just, pretty much kept it under 4,000, 3,000 RPM. Like it never reached the 6,000 RPM limit, which I'm pretty sure is what those motors are capable of. So he ended up blowing that up. And the last car that we looked at, we had been to several different dealerships before. One of them was a Nissan dealer that we went to about an hour and a half, 2 hours away. And then there was another dealership that he also went to that was had like a bunch of used cars on the lot and stuff like that. And he was just looking for anything that he could get his hands on that was within our budget at the time. So then he came across, the last car that he came across was obviously this 2009 Honda Civic. This thing was on the front line, right in the front of the parking lot of this dealership, this Honda dealership. It was just front line, standing tall, no issues on it, 32 test drive miles on it. This is what the original title said. It had 32 test drive miles on it. Dad bought that car with 32 miles on it. The day that his engine blew up in that Jimmy, he ended up buying the car. The Jimmy ended up getting towed away. He came home with that car. Now, I was 7 years old at the time. I absolutely loved that Jimmy. There was a lot of memories made, lots of family trips that we taken that truck on as well. It ended up being just, one of those things where, it's really hard for a young me to say goodbye to a car that I love, especially from my childhood. He came home at about 4 o'clock. It was about October of 2009 that he came home with this car. 7-year-old me was in the backyard jumping on the trampoline, as regular kids that age do. They're just outside playing, having fun. What ended up happening was he came home and he still had his scrubs on. He was in nursing and everything, so getting home from work and about to go take a shower, about to go get dressed, ready for the rest of the night. And I was on the trampoline. Well, he came around the bend, just around the house, around the garage. He looks at me, he waves, and 7-year-old me, I remember this to this day, 7-year-old me, automatically thinking that something was missing. I was like, okay, I know my dad's been looking for a new car for a while now. Do I feel like that just happened? Like, something doesn't feel right here for some reason. And it was just a normal day. That was the weird part. Just, I had this gut feeling that something was missing. I got off the trampoline. It took me about 5 minutes to wrap my head around it. And I eventually got off the trampoline, and lo and behold, that Honda Civic was sitting in the driveway, and my dad had just bought it. I was absolutely devastated. Here's actually some pictures of me in front of that Jimmy. My dad actually took these pictures with me because we knew that the truck wasn't going to last that much longer. He wanted to allow me to get an opportunity to, relive these pictures and go through them again. There's actually a lot of things in that truck that I totally forgot he had that were in those pictures that he ended up having in that truck. He actually had a CB radio, the little white CB radio box at the very bottom. Another thing that this truck had that I completely forgot it had was it actually, instead of having the traditional liftgate style of an SUV, it actually had a tailgate like a truck. And this thing was a two-door. It was very hard to get my brother in and out because my brother, he has very severe handicap. It was very hard to get my brother in and out of the truck because of his disabilities, so we needed something that had 4 doors instead of a 2-door. Obviously, like I said, the Civic came into play and I was devastated, and so I cried. I hated that car for like the first 2 years that he got it. Eventually it won me over, and especially with the fact that it had something that I had never seen in a vehicle before, and that was the tachometer on the bottom and the digital speedometer on the top of the cluster. That was probably like the most spaceship looking car at the time that I had ever seen, and it was something that was very, very new to me, and it's something that I had never seen before in a car, like I said. Eventually I just kept looking at the car. I was like, this thing really feels like a spaceship. It was the first brand new car that my family had ever. We would go on trips with that to Rochester, and we would, you know, have a bunch of fun in it. And eventually it was getting to the point where we fast forward to about a few years later when I'm about to get my learner's permit. So 2018 comes and I get my learner's permit, and 6 months goes by and eventually I got my license. Well, the first time I had ever drove a car was actually that car. I actually drove that car from the DMV with my new permit in hand, and my dad taught me how to drive with that car and drove all the way back to the school. It was so much fun. I still remember the smile on my face that I had when I first got in that car and coming back. And then a few months later, I got my first car, which was a 2007 Chevrolet Uplander. You guys could probably see pictures on my Instagram of this minivan that I had. It was, don't get me wrong, this thing was an absolute pile of junk. The transmission was slipping, the axles were very worn out, the brakes needed some work, there was rust all over it, the rocker panels were pretty much gone, and it also had a very bad exhaust leak. It sounded really, really loud. It sounded cool because it had a 3.9 liter V6 in it, and this thing could do burnouts for days, I'm not going to lie. I beat the living hell out of this van. Eventually the transmission blew up in that. During that same winter, my dad ended up wrecking the car. We had talked for months and months and months before. It was like an on and off conversation, on and off topic that we would talk about me getting that car whenever he gets a new car. That happened way sooner than I thought. He was coming home from work one night and he hit a deer going about 60 miles an hour coming home from work. Now this is something that I wasn't expecting because he had hit a deer with the car about 2 months after he got it brand new, and it only had like a few hundred miles on it at that point. It only had like 600 miles on it before he ended up. I found this out. It was actually Thanksgiving Day of 2018. That was actually like 2 months after I got my license. So at the time that I had this party van, as I like to call it, the Chevy Uplander, after school one day, my grandparents had asked me the night before if I could go and load some firewood down into their cellar. Little did I know, about 30 minutes prior to me getting there, around the same time that school started, my dad and my grandfather actually arrived with the car at my grandparents' house and put it in the yard, and it just sat there. For some reason, somehow, I did not notice the car sitting there. It was just out in plain view. So how I did not notice this car sitting in the yard as it was just broad daylight out, I don't even know, because I think I was just too focused on pulling in the driveway, making sure that I didn't slip on any ice as I was walking into the house, and so I didn't even notice the car. Well, fast forward about 3 hours later, the sun starts to set, and I catch a glimpse of the car. I literally had a piece of wood right in front of me that I was about ready to get down, pick up, and throw down into the cellar hatchway. Some people actually probably know exactly what I'm talking about by the cellar hatchway doors, where it's like the two double doors that are laying at an angle about like this, and you just open it up, and it's basically like a storm cellar where you can, like, you know, walk down there. A lot of people have stairs on them. My grandparents personally didn't have stairs on them, but it was basically like a hatchway where my grandfather would hang all his deer after hunting, and they would throw all the firewood down there. So I was just in the backyard throwing it down the hatchway. I'm sitting there and I'm getting ready to pick up this piece of wood, and I look up to my left, and just out of the blue, I don't even know why I looked left. I think I like heard something fly, like a bird or something, and I was looking to see what it was. As I was looking in that direction, I caught a glimpse of the car from the corner of my eye, and I literally looked back and I was just like, What is that thing doing here? I see my grandma, which we call her Bama. So I see Bama walking around the backyard, and she's walking the dog. And as she's walking back towards the house, it just kind of dawns on me, like, I feel like I wasn't supposed to see this car. I was so excited that I could not contain my excitement any further, and I just had to ask my grandma about why the car was here. So I asked her, I was like, something tells me that I wasn't supposed to see that. And she looks at the car and she starts laughing because she knows that I'm about to get really, really excited. So we ended up getting to the point where we got talking about it, and my grandma told me, like, hey, your dad was just here like 30 minutes before you got here, and he dropped the car off. And I was like, wait, what? So I had a lot of questions, a lot of feelings going through my mind, and I was like, oh my god, this is my car now. It finally clicked in my mind that this is finally my car after years and years and years of waiting. At the same time, I was just getting into like the Japanese car scene. Like I'd been doing research on 8th gen Civics, specifically the FA1 and the FA5, which for those who don't know are the chassis codes for my car as well as the SI of my car. So the FA5 is the Civic SI, and the FA1 is anything LX and up. The van that I got, I drove that home that night, and I want to say about 2 to 3 weeks later, we had somebody finally tow the car from my grandparents' house to where I live now. Got a bunch of work done on it, started tearing a bunch of things apart on the front end, such as the fenders, the bumper, the headlights, the hood. I bought a bunch of new parts off Rock Auto, and I started to do my process of rebuilding it. Well, I realized just how much the damage had extended into the frame and into the radiator support, and I knew that that was going to have to be replaced because a lot of things weren't lining up. The fender wasn't lining up to where it was supposed to be. The mounting points for like all the fasteners and everything were not lining up the way they were supposed to. And so I was like, okay, this thing is going to need like a complete overhaul. Well, at that same time, I was actually going to an automotive class for high school. We ended up taking that car there, and for the next few months, I started just meticulously working on this car, getting it ready to get back on the road. Of course, it wasn't for another few years that this car would get back on the road because it required a New York State salvage inspection. Basically, what the salvage inspection is for, it's not really for safety or emissions or anything like that. You actually needed an emissions and safety inspection before you went to go get the salvage inspection. But the salvage inspection actually only covered for like things like stolen vehicle parts and like auto theft and stuff like that. So it was basically meant to like reduce car part theft. Absolutely just the stupidest thing I've ever heard. I don't know if you guys have ever had to deal with something like that, but that was what I had to deal with getting this car on the road. And there was one thing, I had to show them all the receipts of everything that I bought, order numbers for the Rock Auto shipping labels and stuff like that. I had to show them everything for the radiator support, for the bumper, for the hood, for the fender, for both headlights. It was just a nightmare. It was an absolute nightmare. I actually had to drive that car with no plates, no registration, just a emissions inspection and a title in hand. And I also had a sticker on the back windshield that says in transport. So I was literally actively transporting that car to go get a salvage inspection, which was hilarious because the amount of times that I got looked at by a state trooper and they had to do a double take saying like, oh wait, that Civic had no plates on it. Then they would go do a U-turn, try to chase after me. Then they'd see the paper in the back window and realized we can't pull them over. So that was absolutely hilarious to see. We were probably driving like a good hour and a half, 2 hours, maybe, probably like 2.5 hours away, I'd say, to Utica. And we went down to Utica and we got the car inspected, drove the car back and waited for my new title to come in. My new title came in about a week or two later. I ended up taking it to the DMV and getting the car registered once again. So this car was able to see the streets once more, and I had pretty much saved it from its grave. But fast forward to about 4 years later, the car was having a bunch of issues pop up, like on the body, on the fixes that I had done to it. Hood latch and everything was starting to rot out from the radiator support because I never painted it. I kind of just covered up the welds with primer and stuff, and I just wanted to drive the car. I was just too excited to drive the car, so I just kind of half-assed all the work. That was kind of my downfall for the car because I ended up having to redo everything. I'm actually currently redoing everything from the welds to all the bolt holes and stuff. I've snapped a bunch of bolts. There's a lot of rust on the car that I need to fix up now. and there's just a bunch of boatload of issues that pretty much arose from my lack of work and effort and my lack thereof of effort putting into the car when I first rebuilt it. So I'm currently trying to fix all that. I have the back drum brakes done. I need to do disc brakes in the front. There's just a bunch of different things that I need to do to this car now. I'm going to take you guys for the ride on it. So right now it's currently sitting in the garage waiting to be rebuilt, and I'll have more videos to shoot on that here in the meantime. I'm not sure how much time I'll have to film, but I am definitely trying my best to rebuild this car as much as possible. This is going to be a really fun project, and I can't wait to take you guys along for the ride. It's going to be very interesting. I'm very, very excited, and yeah, this is going to be one of my dream builds, basically. So speaking of it being my dream build, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a list of my future plans with this car. So number one is obviously going to be fixing all of the mistakes that I did back in high school when I first rebuilt the car, and make it a lot stronger, make it rust free, and pretty much delete all the rust off of it. I already put an exhaust on it already. The next thing that I want to do is I want to take the original engine out of it, and I want to do a K24 swap. Now I'm looking to get a K24A2 from either a JDM FD2 Type R or a 04 to 08 Acura TSX. So those had the 6-speed manual with the K24A2s. And I also need a donor Civic Si for the ECU, the wiring harness, as well as the rocker panels. So I'm going to try and find something down south to see if I can fix up the body using a donor car. And then the other thing is I want to do a FD2 body conversion on it. So front and rear body conversion using the FD2 Type R parts, front bumper, the headlights, and everything. So it'll basically make this car from looking like this to looking like this. So the FD2 is just a much more aggressive body style for it. They were commonly used on the Canadian model of this Civic, which is actually an Acura CSX, and it was a Canada only car. They actually made a Type S model which had a K20 in it. I believe it was a K20 Z3 just like the SI. And yeah, that's pretty much what I plan to do on the car, other than the rust repair and the engine swap and the body swap. It's just going to be little things from here on out. I want to do a tune, I want to do a Pro Charger, I want to do axles, I want to do possibly an all-wheel drive system using a viscous coupler from like a CRV or an Odyssey or something like that, custom drive shafts, all that. Really, the opportunities for what I want to do to this car are pretty much endless. I have had such a creative mindset for what I want to do to this car, and I have such clear vision of what I want this car to look like. Eventually, on top of the FD2 body swap, it's also going to get a Kevman's carbon fiber wide body kit. So I will have a wide body kit on it at some point, but worry about fixing everything that I mistakenly didn't fix on the car using low effort, and actually this time I got to put some effort into it. So this car is going to look a lot better by the time that I'm done with it. It's also going to be a lot faster, I hope. I did install a rocket chip in it. For those who don't know what a rocket chip is, it's basically a OBD2 plug-in chip that you can put on to the car, and it'll, increase its power a little bit. It'll actually change like the injector timing, the fuel pulse, as well as the ignition timing. So this uses electronic ignition, so it adjusts like the ignition timing just a little bit, makes it have just a little bit more power. It says up to an 80 horsepower increase, I believe, but I don't know how true that is, especially with how many miles are on the car now. The car has about 153,000 miles as of right now. When I got the car and it was wrecked, it had about 129,000 miles, 128,000, somewhere within that range. By the time I got it registered, it had 132,000 miles on it. So you can kind of tell just how many times I had taken that car out and illegally drove it just to have fun with it, especially seeing as how I was waiting on the inspection for the salvage title. So I kind of just took it out, had fun with it, and just drove it around country roads. But yeah, guys, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much the backstory of my 2009 Honda Civic LX R18. But yeah, guys, like I said, make sure you guys subscribe, make sure you guys leave a like, let me know down in the comments below what you guys think I should do to the car next, and yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. So stay surgy, peace out.